Welcome, everybody, to the Symposium of the ISSNAF Embassy of Italy Award for Research in Artificial Intelligence. I am Filippo Menzer. I'm a distinguished Laddy Professor of Informatics and Computer Science at Indiana University and the Director of the Observatory on Social Media. As probably most of you know, ISSNAF is the Italian Scientists and Scholars in North America Foundation. Its mission is to connect, empower, and celebrate more than 3,000 Italian scholars, researchers, and technologists in North America. ISSNAF awards the Young Investigator Awards in various disciplines to outstanding early career Italian researchers working in the US or Canada in recognition of their significant and innovative contributions to their fields of research. This particular symposium is for the Embassy of Italy Award, established in 2020. This year's edition recognizes Italian researchers in the US who provide fundamental contributions to all aspects of artificial intelligence, including technological and engineering advancements, transformative applications across disciplines, education, economic impact, ethical development to support societal needs, and solutions to mitigate harmful use of AI. Let me introduce my two fellow members of the Scientific Council and of the jury today. Elisa Bertino is the Conte Professor of Computer Science at Purdue University, where she heads the Cyberspace Security Lab. And Leila De Floriani is a professor at the University of Maryland, with joint appointments with the Department of Geographical Sciences and the University of Maryland Institute for Advanced Computer Studies. We have three outstanding finalists today. They will give brief presentations of their research in alphabetical order. I invite the audience to enter their questions in the Zoom chat. We start with Dr. Luca Luceri, Research Assistant Professor at the University of Southern California, who will talk about AI-driven approaches for countering online harms on social media. Luca, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Menzer, for the introduction, and hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss my research for countering online harms on social media networks, and I'll describe my vision to enhance the safety of these socio-technical systems. Okay, before getting into the technical aspects of my research, let me share a bit about my background and what led me down to this path. I'm from a small town near Bari in the beautiful region of Puglia. And as a kid, I spent my time in Bari, mostly playing football and studying math with my grandmother. It was during that time that an event occurred, which I believe strongly influenced my decision to enter this field. In particular, when I turned 10, my parents hosted a big birthday party, inviting friends and their families, and they all pitched in to give me a mobile phone as a gift. Just a simple Nokia 3310. And back in the day, back in the early 2000s, you can imagine how exciting that piece of technology was for a kid like me to play games and connect with friends. But just as quickly as I got it, the excitement turned to disappointment. My parents were worried about what a phone might expose me to, decided it wasn't safe for my age, and took it back. At the time, it felt like a huge loss. But looking back, I see that moment planted the seeds, how that moment planted the seeds for my fascination with technology, its safety, and the need for regulation. Issues that are now at the core of my research into AI, social media, and their potential risks. And when it comes to social media, online harms encompass issues like polarization, algorithmic biases, mental health, and the spread of fake news and hate speech. And among all of these risks, my research focused mainly on issues related to the manipulation of public opinion through misinformation operations. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. And in 2018, in the run-up to the midterm US election, I had my first exposure to an attempt of manipulating social media conversation through social bots, which are automated accounts controlled by software. And for me at the time, as a naive PhD student, I was expecting that, okay, these accounts will simply reshare and amplify content. But when I started examining the activities of these bots, I discovered that they had an agenda aimed to create division among two opposing factions, sharing inflammatory content in a coordinated way. And to my surprise, this strategy paid off, as they received large engagement and endorsement by human legitimate users. And in particular, I discovered that right-leaning users were significantly more susceptible to this deceptive activity than liberal ones. And this finding was eventually confirmed by other work, including a Nature Communication paper that corroborated this result. And this work received also media coverage months after the midterm election, raising concerns about the use of sophisticated bots in the upcoming 2020 election. Now, I hope that the example of bots activity gave you a principal understanding of the underlying mechanism of information operation and their elements. But in a more structured way, the illustration in this slide mirrors the life cycle of an information operation. So first of all, the initiators of these campaigns create inauthentic personas who generate and share content on social media. The drivers of these campaigns can be of different nature, ranging from bots to human operators, and also obviously their combination. And these inauthentic personas use a variety of techniques to amplify content in a coordinated fashion, creating an illusion of widespread agreement around certain viewpoints and manipulating platforms' feed algorithm by making content appear more popular than it actually is. Now, the main problem of these campaigns is that organic, legitimate users trust, reshare, and further amplify content generated by this inauthentic network of coordinated accounts, which can eventually be picked up by media outlets and resonate to a larger extent. So in the first part of my research journey as a PhD student at the University of Bern in Switzerland, I realized that bots were not the only actors in this manipulation of social media and their discourse on social media, but also human operators play a role and are often involved in this malicious activity. So I worked on computational AI models that could enable the detection of human operators, in particular state-sponsored human operators that are also known as trolls. And you probably have heard about Russian trolls and their interference in the 2016 US election. So, well, for this purpose, I devised an AI detection tool for trolls on Twitter that uses an inverse reinforcement learning framework to extract the incentives and motivation from observed behavior. Basically, inverse reinforcement learning algorithms reverse engineer the rewards that led and exhibited behavior, which is often formulated as a sequence of state action pairs. So I proposed a new formulation of Twitter users as reinforcement learning agents, through which I could build a sequence of state action pairs for every user in the social network by leveraging their logs of activity on Twitter. And logs of activity both in terms of feedback received by other Twitter users and the actions performed by the users themselves. And basically, inverse reinforcement learning algorithms take the sequence of state action pairs as an input and estimates the reward function that might have driven users and their activity. And these rewards are basically scalar values associated to each state action pair. So I could use, and I use these scalar values as features of a supervised machine learning algorithm. In this case, I had 3 states and 4 actions, so I could have 12 possible rewards. And it turned out that this 12-dimensional representation of rewards alone is capable of telling apart trolls from users. I could achieve, using a simple machine learning algorithm, an AUC of 89% in the detection of trolls, in particular Russian trolls. And we achieve all of these without analyzing the textual content of the user's messages at all. And this is particularly important nowadays, given the growing use of LLMs for malicious operations, especially because distinguishing between content generated by AI and humans is increasingly challenging. And the key feature of this model is also its ability to provide interpretable features and a characterization of bots, of trolls and user behavior. In particular, users gain more reward from having their content reshared, whereas trolls receive higher rewards for posting and reposting content, regardless of the feedback received by others. And while this behavior might be expected, we validated it using a mathematical formulation with inverse reinforcement learning. So in a way, we framed human decision-making into this inverse reinforcement learning framework. And the idea brought to a project proposal, which I was awarded with by the Swiss National Science Foundation, and also gave me the possibility to validate this framework in different operations from various countries. And the system also became a benchmark method for troll detection and contributed to a DARPA program. Now, these malicious actors are becoming increasingly sophisticated, employing a variety of techniques to escape detection while keep distributing their actions to artificially amplify content in a coordinated manner. And my current efforts at the USC Information Science Institutes are dedicated to detect this coordinated and authentic activity. And we do that through a variety of AI network-based models, where the main idea is to detect coordination by examining similarities, exceptional or abnormal similarities in user activities. So we can use these similarities to build graphs with edge weight representing the degree of similarity. The higher the similarity, the higher the weight of these edges. And while existing methods filter out low-weight edges to find coordination, I realized that users driving these campaigns should show a strong collective similarity. And in a similarity network, this means that these inauthentic accounts are connected to many other nodes, to many other inauthentic accounts. And we can measure this number of connections by looking at examining network properties like node centrality. Node centrality is nothing new, but it was never used in this context. And it turned out that this approach surpasses existing solutions across different campaigns. Now, this video illustrates a network dismantling process where nodes are filtered out based on their centrality in a similarity network. You can notice how blue nodes persist through this dismantling process, resulting in accurate detection of coordinated actors. And we achieved a higher precision with respect to state-of-the-art approaches, 42% more precise across different information operation and with different similarity networks, while maintaining a comparable recall.
5 minutes to go, Luca. Thank you.
Following this formulation, we recently developed an innovative model that utilizes exactly these similarity networks to fine-tune large language models for the detection of the drivers of these campaigns. And this work was also recently recognized with the Best Paper Award at the Beyond Fact track at the Web Conference 2024. And is also currently deployed by DARPA through a project related to the detection of these campaigns that I'm co-PIing at USC. Now, most importantly, our model allowed us to uncover new and unseen coordinated influence campaigns in different contexts and geopolitical events. And here is an example of COVID-related disinformation campaigns that we identified through our model, which pinpointed networks of inauthentic actors, these red nodes here, that artificially amplifying false narratives from 12 social media users, the yellow nodes here in this network. These 12 social media users, also known as disinformation dozen. In this scenario, these coordinated efforts had the objective of artificially amplifying content, making it more popular than it is. We detected other strategies in campaigns related to the 2020 election, where clusters of users, like these ones, were involved in copy-paste activities, meaning that they were sharing similar tweets, but with small variations to create an illusion of public consensus or widespread agreement around certain viewpoints. And turned out to be, these viewpoints or narratives turned out to be conspiracies about a stolen election that led then to also the US Capitol attack. More recently, in the context of the upcoming election, we discovered how these campaigns span multiple platforms, and our model was able to identify a coordinated activity spanning several platforms, Twitter and Telegram in particular, disseminating political content, sometimes AI-generated, through duplicated mock news sites, amplifying also Russian state-affiliated media outlets, and promoting a YouTube channel which is still active and received more than 30,000 interactions. We're also trying to extend this idea to other content modalities, studying, for instance, how internet memes change and are adopted across platforms, and exploring their potential misuse for harmful purposes. Here is an example of memes and how they change across different platforms like Reddit and Discord. As I said before in the beginning of this talk, the main issue of these campaigns is that is their downstream effect on organic users who might be susceptible and sometimes are susceptible to these influence efforts. So in the last few minutes, I'll provide an overview of my vision of what we can do to mitigate these influence attempts, in particular, trying to protect those most susceptible to influence. So how can we do that? Well, my idea is to propose network interventions and moderation strategies that can mitigate these online harms. For instance, we might reduce the exposure of susceptible users to the content generated by these inauthentic accounts. And this idea led to a project that I'm co-investigating with international partners, whose objective is to create a framework to evaluate the impact of moderation strategies through agent-based modeling. And this assessment will provide a principal understanding of the effect and intended and unintended consequences of regulation, and can therefore inform policymakers and regulators. Now, my aim in this project is to integrate LLMs into this multi-agent testbed, combining the strength of agent-based modeling in simulating social interactions with the language processing capabilities of LLMs. And I plan to consider also other forms of online harms, including the negative effects of social media on mental health, focusing on negative influence on issues like eating disorder. For instance, this is a recent study on this topic, or LGBTQ plus acceptance, and develop strategies that promote positive body image and healthy behaviors. So concluding, I'd like to thank all my mentors, and in particular, all the students that I mentored during the last few years. I've been extremely lucky in finding these brilliant students that contributed immensely to many of the papers I described today. And thank you for your attention. Feel free to scan the QR code to know more about our latest initiative to safeguard online discourse related to the upcoming US election. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you very much for the nice presentation and staying on time. We appreciate that. I don't actually see the clapping option, but good job. Now, we do have time for questions. If there are any from the audience, as a reminder, please feel free to put them on the chat. And until some questions pop up there, I will start with one. So a lot of the results that you presented here seem to be based on data from Twitter. Now, we all know that those things are changing. And so how do you deal with the fact that that data is no longer available, or what kind of data sources are available for your research these days?
Thank you for this question. So it's right on point of what we are trying to do in the context of the upcoming election. Here, we still have some data from Twitter, but we are trying to expand our capabilities to many other platforms, including Telegram that provides an API, TikTok that provides an API, YouTube that provides an API. So we are trying to, first of all, validate our models that were trained and tested on Twitter on these other platforms. And this, of course, it's something that might require some time. And expand these capabilities, trying also to map this potential interference or potential operation across platforms. One thing that I forgot to mention is that Facebook and Meta in particular also lately provided us with data from information operation that they detected and released this data set. So Facebook in particular is something that we started exploring in the context of the election.
Thank you. Leila or Elisa, any questions?
Yeah, this is Elisa. I have a question. So your tools to detecting, those coordinated bots, they seem to be very effective. But do you think that they will be adopted by companies managing, social networks or not? Because, that could be very useful by those companies, right?
Yeah, ideally, yes. That's one of our aims. I will say providing these tools to social media providers and policymakers and regulators as well. For social media providers, they have much more data than we do. They have information that is related, personal information related to the accounts, including their IP address, personal information, phone numbers, that allow sometimes to facilitate this task because they can understand if an account is from Russia rather than the US, or if they have some strategies that try to scale up their information operation. So they for sure can use something similar to this, but they are much more facilitated in their task because they have.
But do you think, sorry to interrupt, but do you think that they will adopt or not? I mean, because so far it doesn't seem that they are adopting
well, this is a different
sophisticated tools.
Yeah, this is a different spin or actually this is a different point of view that from what I was saying. It's more related to their reluctancy or not in adopting moderation strategy. We have seen that since Twitter changed management, there has been less effort and less attempt to moderate it. Platform. It depends overall on the strategy that the management and the company wants to pursue. Some companies are doing this. Facebook and Meta is one example of this, and they are also open to collaborate with us. And indeed, they release this data and they collaborate. But it all comes to their decision in enacting this kind of strategies. Some platforms do, some others not. There's not a unique answer.
That's okay.
Thank you for the question. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Leila?
I have a question. Okay, actually, I have a curiosity and a more general question. You're talking about that you are applying some or developing actually AI network models. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. I should have a slide somewhere, but it will take some time to find it. Anyway, so the idea here is the first idea that we had was to use these similarity networks and provide these as an input to LLMs. This was our very first attempt. That worked quite well, indeed, was achieving great results. The second step that we tried was to use more sophisticated technologies like GNN, graph convolutional neural networks, and trying to build somehow a graph foundation model similar to what we have been seeing with large language models, but with graphs. We have tons of data related to this information operation that might create this sort of graph foundation model, which might be used for this task of detecting campaigns. So GNN definitely is something we explored, and we have already some interesting results on these. I found a slide in the meantime. This model that we called IO Hunter is basically what I was just describing. So trying to use GNN and combining graph information with textual information in one shot. And this looks like to have incredibly accurate results, not only when considering the whole data set at our disposal, but it works incredibly well in data scarcity scenarios. For instance, when using a very tiny proportion of data, like 0.1% or 1% of data, and comparing it with one of the approach that I proposed in a previous paper based on node to vec, we can see that this approach based on GNN is particularly capable of learning these patterns with a very tiny proportion of data. So we are going in the direction of we are going towards building this graph foundation model using this kind of graph neural network technologies.
There's one more minute to go.
Thank you very much.
Leila, did you have one more or?
Oh, no, that was my kind of general question.
Okay.
But for a minute, I can do it offline sometime.
Okay. I don't see any questions on the chat. So Eugenio said we have 1 minute, so I'll ask one last question, slightly more technical. You were showing these similarity networks. So, but some accounts can be similar without anything being suspicious. You said something like abnormal similarity. What does that mean? Like, how do you know that something is suspicious?
Yeah, good point. So the underlying assumption there is that legitimate users act independently. Therefore, if we observe abnormal similarities, as I said before, that deviates from the mass or from like general behavior, this can be a signal to pinpoint coordination. So the idea is to look at these distribution of similarities and identify those that are statistically significantly different from the distribution from the mass. So this is our first signal that this similarity might be suspicious and provide an initial signals that we use in these similarity networks for then filtering users out also based on other properties as node centrality.
Okay, so you use a statistical model to detect the unexpected
Yes.
similarities. Okay, gotcha. I think we are out of time. Thanks again, Luca. Again, we don't have the copying options, but great job. And we are going to transition to our second finalist now. Dr. Marco Romanelli is a research associate at Rutgers University, and he will tell us about trustworthy machine learning, an information theoretic perspective. Marco, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I will start my presentation with three key research questions that have driven my research during the last year and changes, I would say. And I will use the rest of my presentation to provide answers to these questions. So the first one is a key question in trustworthy AI, which is to which extent can we trust the decisions made by AI systems? We know that especially in high-stakes applications, this is a fundamental question, as inference errors can happen all the time, even when a model is not actively attacked by any malicious actor. The second question regards the problem of machine learning models being attacked by malicious agents, both at inference time with adversarial examples or at training time with poisoning and vector examples. And many approaches are based on binary detection, but individually these approaches do not stand the test of robustness. So a question that I've been asking myself and that I worked on with my collaborators is, can we optimally aggregate these solutions that sort of come for free off the shelf from previous literature? And more in depth, what are the limits of binary detection when applied to this problem? And then the third question is related to the fact that errors may not be equally distributed within a statistical population. And so the question that I investigated for this specific problem is, what can we do to ensure that models are both fair and private, where in contexts where we need to also guarantee privacy. And these questions are relevant and timely. I was just surfing the web for the last 6 to 12 months worth of headlines, and we see that a lot of incidents have been reported and blamed on AI systems. So, as a trustworthy AI researcher, I feel like we need to do more. We need to contribute more to this field in order to make these models more trustworthy. And the final point that I want to make before starting answering the questions that I asked is the following: why do I use information theory in my research? Information theory is a fantastic asset when it comes to AI and ML at large, and probably much more when it comes to trustworthy AI. The idea is that information theory models any machine learning model as a communication channel that maps an input X onto an output Y. And if we look under the hood, what this channel does is just an approximation, an estimation of a posterior distribution of the output given the input. And from this assumption, information theory provides us with fantastic tools such as entropy for uncertainty estimation, compression for data representation, and mutual information and information bottleneck for the problem of generalization. All right, getting to the first question: can we detect prediction errors at inference time? The answer is yes, and the solution is sort of schematized in this plot. So we have a sample X coming from a given distribution, and then we have our machine learning model that estimates this probability of Y given X. We call it Y hat just to distinguish it from the real posterior, since this is an estimation. And then we have this placeholder rectangle here, which is our detector. A detector should be a test statistics on the posterior distribution estimation that can be compared to threshold gamma. And if we are above or below this threshold, we can decide whether we want to accept or reject the decision made by the model. Now, as I said before, we're using an estimation. If we had the true posterior distribution, then we could optimally detect misclassification with an oracle detector. However, this is not the case. And a lot of papers and articles in the literature, they're using some variation of the argmax of the posterior distribution. The solution that I proposed together with my colleagues is slightly different. First of all, we use the complete distribution, and it represents a sort of probability of incorrectly classifying an input X as if it was randomly labeled according to the posterior distribution that is estimated by the model itself. It's a very simple solution, can be plugged in as a statistical test comparing that can be compared to threshold in order to decide whether we want to accept and reject. Now, these solutions comes with three main takeaways. Well, the first one is that if we look at the green and yellow curves, we do better than our competitors in the sense that these curves have a larger area underneath, which means better performance in detection. And the other point that I want to make is that if we look at the 95% true positive rate, we achieve it with much lower false positive rate than the competitors. So better results also for low false positive rate regime. Now, the other takeaway is that we can come up with a precise bound that connects our metric to the real probability of error or probability of misclassification, plus and minus a term, the delta X term, that is basically provides a contribution that is as small as the error in estimation. So if our posterior estimated posterior close to the original one, this delta X is a small value. And then finally, our score is directly related to the Rényi divergence between the model posterior and the uniform distribution, which measures the maximum uncertainty that a model can have when all the classes are equally likely independently of the input. So it comes naturally to ask ourselves, how can we use this uncertainty estimator to represent uncertainty? And something that we would like to have in machine learning is a confusion matrix like the one that I'm showing now. This one was computed on the test set of CIFAR 10, very common benchmark. And there are two main messages coming from this matrix. First of all, errors are distributed differently for different classes. There are two classes, cats and dogs, which are the hardest to classify. And in fact, we see that most of the mistakes happen for those two classes. And usually when one is mistaken, it's because it's predicted like the other and vice versa. Now, if we look at our G-score and we try to reproduce a matrix like this, we get this matrix here, which is very unsatisfactory, as it cannot model uncertainty at all. We have zero uncertainty when the classification is correct, but outside of the diagonal, pretty much anything can happen. We wouldn't be able to measure this. So something that was exploited here is a diversity and dissimilarity measure coming from Rao from the 1980s. Where we can train a parametric dissimilarity matrix that acts like an external observer. We only need few shots, few samples of correctly and incorrectly classified instances, and we can use a parameter lambda, which is a Lagrangian multiplier, to optimize this function. This function can be optimized in closed form. It only requires a few samples and doesn't require an expensive algorithm. And what we come up with is a new score that can substitute the G score that I discussed earlier to detect incorrectly misclassified instances. And on top of that, if we now plot the D matrix, we can see that this is extremely close to the desired confusion matrix that we want in figure A, and therefore also provides an interpretable measure of uncertainty. All right, and based on this idea, we have also, together with my colleagues, we have also obtained a couple of papers this last year, which are the state of the art for uncertainty estimation in regression, and also for reinforcement learning for Boolean circuit minimization, which is the goal. The goal of this problem is that of synthesizing Boolean math into hardware. All right. Moving on to the second question. So we have discussed the fact that malicious agents can craft adversarial examples to fool machine learning models into incorrect predictions at inference time. And in the worst case, something that attackers have realized quite early is that not only you can attack a target model, you can also attack any deployed defense that is deployed to defend the target model. And something that we found out, I would say at this point about a couple of years ago, is that when we try to attack detectors, we don't even need to do anything to elaborate it. We can just switch the loss function that we're trained on at attack time, so during inference, and this most of the time is already a very successful attack. And of course, the problem is that this renders many detectors that are based on binary detection completely useless, as they're not robust to different attacks. So
5 more minutes
information
to go,
theory.
Marco. Thank you.
Thank you. Information theory comes to the rescue again, and if we have a set of detectors and we only make the simple assumption that at least one of them is performing well against one attack, and we have a set K of attacks, then we can solve this problem indirectly because this is intractable, but we can find a surrogate that can be perfectly optimized. And the idea is that we want to minimize the regret, which is the probability of picking the wrong detector when a certain attack comes into the game. And what we see is that when our aggregation, which is in blue, is compared to individual detectors, we get better performance in detection and also standard deviation, which is lower, which is also a good symptom of robustness. Another question that we asked together with other colleagues recently is the problem of detecting poisonous samples or backdoors in the training data. Now, if we look at the literature from the last couple of years, there are, I would say at this point, at least 40 papers that propose new binary detectors. Of course, everyone outperforms the previous one. It's always unclear what kind of assumptions they make. When it comes to the empirical part of the paper. So we looked at this problem from the mathematical perspective, and of course, I'm happy to discuss the details more in depth offline. But what we came up is a set of bounds, and this one is probably the most important of all of them, which is an impossibility results. Now, let's move on to what the bound means. We can get back to the math later on. The idea is that something that we didn't know about this, and when we found out, it was quite concerning, and is that even if we consider a very simple task like MNIST classification, so 10 handwritten digits that we're trying to assign to their class, and we consider two distributions, the original one and the distribution that someone can poison, but we make this distribution easy to detect, so they are far away in total variation, and we only require at least 90% accuracy. In order to do this, we need a number of samples that amounts to 10 to the power of 942 samples in order to achieve this 90% accuracy on all the possible instances of MNIST. And of course, once we look at these and the fact that vector detection is doable on MNIST, which is only 60,000 samples, we understand that this is just a case of luck. But in general, this is a very, very hard problem. And then finally, something that I've been working on recently is the coexistence of privacy and fairness. So when we use encrypted data and cryptographic primitives, the number of nonlinearities in a network, for instance, ReLU activation functions, becomes very prohibitive because it's a bottleneck and makes inference very, very slow. So something that some researchers have found out in the last couple of years is that if we reduce the number of non-linearities, switching them with linearities, we may end up losing just a couple of points in the percentage, in the accuracy, and achieve great speed up. But something that we realized quite early with Abound and then with several experiments is that this impact is completely diversified depending on the group. So for instance, if we look at this US Census data set, the group 18 to 64, which is the majority, is never impacted when we go from the initial model with 100% values to a much lighter model with only 2% of the values retained. However, when we look at the group with age 13 to 17, which is underrepresented, this moving from 100% values to only 2% of values basically creates a loss in terms of accuracy between 15 and 20 percentage points, clearly pointing at a very diverse and disparate effect on over and underrepresented groups. So we have proposed a mitigation for a better coexistence of fairness and privacy, and I'm happy to say that the results are quite satisfying. Then I also started investigating bias and toxicity in text generation and large language models, especially in constrained regimes where we have few resources. So for instance, when we use low rank adaptation to approximate the fine tuning of a model. And then something that I'm working on is also the detection of auto distribution samples and its limitations when it's regarded as a problem, a binary detection problem. And of course, I hope that in the next months and years, I'll be able to contribute even more to the world of trustworthy AI and ML. I would like to thank you for your attention, and also special thanks to all my fantastic collaborators that really helped me and taught me a lot through these years.
Thank you very much, Marco, for a nice presentation. Again, clapping. I don't see questions in the chat, but we have a little bit of time for questions from the jury. Does somebody else want to start this time? Leila?
Oh yeah, actually, I would like only first of all, thanks for the nice presentation, and about your content. You're talking about some future direction. First of all, what will be the general future direction of the field? What are the important problems in the field? I think it's a big question, that one. And how what you discussed as future direction, also particularly interesting, your recent work on fairness and privacy trade-off, and going that how it is located in this framework of the advancement of this field on trustworthy AI.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Well, the thing that I always like to tell people when they ask me about future directions, given where I'm coming from, is that the beauty of addressing these problems from the information theory plus machine learning point of view is that we can end up with very precise solutions, very well formalized mathematical problems. And so one of the directions is definitely to continue this line of work where we take problems that are there, we know that they're there, but most of the time they lack the formalization to be really investigated in a formal and precise way. I made the example of vectors. Vector is a problem that, especially in large language models, is going to explode soon because we don't really know. It's hard to control what these models have been trained on. We know that we're scraping the web, and Reddit, Twitter, whatever, everything is used to train these things. So it's pretty easily to envision, some malicious actor that is, starting to put some weird prompts online just so that they can be scraped and can be used to, basically negatively impact these models. So I would say that the main direction that I see is to, first of all, formalize most of these problems. What does it mean to implant a vector in a large language models, what are the challenges that, transitioning from what is now called standard machine learning into this new era of deep and large model would entail. And so definitely that. And the nice part about, again, like having a good mathematical formalization is that then you can provide solutions that may not be all the time super flashy, but they can have, operational guarantees, and you can guarantee that if you know something about the distribution, then that's what you can expect with probability 1, with confidence 1, which is, in my, from my perspective, is much better than having just a few empirical results where you're showing that something works, but you don't know what's going to happen when you switch to another domain, and so on and so forth. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I have a question.
Mhm.
So you've talked about malicious attacks or adversarial attacks, and can you provide a scenario? I mean, I think you were just talking about that just a second ago, answering Leila, but could you give us a concrete scenario of how malicious actors would do that, and how does that differ from cases in which bad actors would simply take an open source model and do whatever they want with it? Like they can train it, they can retrain it. Is that an example of a malicious use, or are you thinking about cases where an AI is available in some control environment, maybe it is provided by a provider and it is trained with safeguards, but then through prompts or through some ad hoc additional training, then the bad actor can somehow take over so that the users of that particular model won't know that it has been poisoned? Could you just clarify the different scenarios? Are these the same thing? Are they different things? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you for your question. This is actually something that it's important to stress. So I would say at least two different kind of attacks at this point, even though rebranding is a big thing in AI. But the two main classes of attacks that I've been focusing so far are the inference time attacks, where usually you download a pre-trained model, or if someone gives you a model, and what you're trying to do is to just engineer by optimizing some kind of attack loss that you want to minimize. You try to engineer samples for which that model is going to make a mistake. So you're not touching the model, you're just exploiting any weakness that is embedded in the model per se, and you're just trying to find instances in your domain where the model is going to fail. On the other end, you can have more active attacks, and that's the case of poisoning and backdoors, which I believe is what is going to become big soon for large language models, where you can take a model, but you always have a time where you can change the parameters inside the model, because you can do some full fine-tuning if you're very rich, or some fine-tuning if you're not so rich, or some acceleration like low rank or galore, where basically you do fine-tuning, but like at a very, very lower cost. You can always input information that is the voluntarily you input, but is erroneous or wrong, and it's just like created to steer the model towards certain mistakes. So that's the I would say probably the future of attacks, because it's right now everybody can take a model and maybe do an iteration of fine-tuning. If you have a couple of GPUs, you don't want to use the last model in town. I think it's pretty affordable at this point. And then you can also release and publish these models, for instance, on platforms like Hugging Face. And now the user has not so much interest, I would say, or tools to sort of like check the quality of this model and like what this model can do wrong.
1 more minute to go.
Thank you, Eugenio. Okay, thank you, Marco. That helps. So basically, you're saying people can take an open model, do the kind of attack that you're describing, and then putting that open model back out for other people to use, and they may not be aware that the poisoning has occurred.
Yeah, and actually sometimes it happens by mistake. So for instance, during the summer, I was working on specific large language models, which are tuned using instructions. And basically, some instructions were completely, they were followed but in a completely funky way. And then we observed what was used for fine tuning. And it was also prompts that were created by another language model. So basically, the second language model was fine tuned on the output of a previous one. And it was basically inheriting all the issues of the previous language model. So even taking shortcuts can be quite dangerous.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very interesting. Okay, I
Thank you.
think we are out of time. Unless, Elisa, did you have?
No, because
Go
I
ahead.
have an hard stop, so we need
Okay,
to move
okay.
to next speaker.
So we will
Yeah.
move. Thank you, Marco. And
Thank you.
thank you. We will move to our last finalist, last but not least, Dr. Carmelo Sferrazza. He's a postdoctoral researcher at the University of California, Berkeley, and we'll talk about bridging the gap between embodied AI and human intelligence. Carmelo, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlos Sferrazza. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Berkeley Artificial Intelligence Research, or BEAR, at UC Berkeley. It is a great honor to be invited for this talk, and I'd like to thank the organizer and, of course, the award jury for the kind consideration. This recent concept video from Tesla is very well aligned with the objective of my research, which is to bring robots as assistants in our lives, to improve quality of life of millions of people, taking care of tedious chores that people would rather avoid, especially at a later age and for the elderly, such as unloading a dishwasher, picking things up from the ground, or carrying heavy loads. And this is the dream of many researchers in robotics and AI, but we all know we're not quite there yet. And what my research is trying to answer is, what are we missing to have robots reach this degree of intelligence? To start, the main difference between classical and AI and what we generally call an embodied AI is that in the latter, we have a high degree of physical interaction with the environment. Basically, for general AI systems, we are kind of used to some sort of machinery that is able to think about some of the inputs and generate some outputs. While for robotics and embodied AI, it is all about the environment. We use sensors to sense from the environment and have some actuators or motors to make changes and interact with the environment based on AI reasonings. The core part of an embodied AI system is the embodiment, often a robot, which is basically the interface to sense and act in the physical world. Which raises the first important question of this talk, which is the right embodiment? A partial answer to this is that the robotics industry is taking an incredibly sharp turn in the last couple of years by starting the development of all these new humanoid robots, very much replicating the human morphology. I like to call this the humanoid summer in contrast to the famous AI winters, but the reality is that there are some very solid reasons behind this current wave. In particular, the key answer to why we want humanoid robots to mimic human morphology can be summarized in this sentence: solve human tasks in human-like environments using tools made for humans. And I'm not talking about a single task, but about all tasks that humans can do, using the same robot, which is why we often like to call humanoid robots generalists as opposed to specialists. However, humanoids do pose several challenges. The experimental setups to operate them are still costly and somewhat not very safe, because of their weights mainly. And they are complex, high-dimensional systems. Also, the sensory feedback from the environment is not yet mature. So, in this talk, I want to guide you through how, over the past years, my research has focused on addressing each of these various challenges. Let's start from a comparison with other fields in AI. Many of the people in the audience, I'm sure, will be familiar with ImageNet in the computer vision community. ImageNet was a large benchmark dataset used for a competition that has enormously contributed to advanced computer vision and machine learning in general. And I'm mentioning this because it is in strong contrast with what happens in robotics, where robot data is scarce, and we cannot simply crawl the internet for more of it, because it actually requires sensing and interacting with the physical world, which can be expensive or unsafe. For this reason, the robotics community has identified simulation as a great tool to benchmark intelligence, basically abstracting it from hardware limitations before eventually focusing on what is called transfer from simulation to the real world. In this spirit, in my work, I've introduced a benchmark simulation suite that aims to provide the ultimate set of tasks that encompass a definition of humanoid intelligence. The main feature of this work, Humanoid Bench, is that it comes with a very wide diversity of tasks, 27 in total, each of which addressing different challenges. And these challenges range from locomotion, stabilization, or navigation, to complex dynamic manipulation interaction tasks, including very interesting practical tasks such as truck unloading, room cleaning, or kitchen operation. The benchmark has been very well received and is setting a very high bar to push humanoid robotics research to a whole new level. In particular, we've shown that state-of-the-art reinforcement learning, which is a widely used technique for robots to learn from trial and error, struggles on most complex tasks. What makes such a difference between humanoids and other robot platforms is that the robot controllers fail to use many skills at once, like balancing, walking, manipulating objects, and so on. Formally, the biggest issue is that humanoid robots feature a large number of actuators and degrees of freedom. And addressing the issue basically resorts to two different options. One way could be to decouple degrees of freedom and have two separate controllers for upper and lower body. But when, for example, we want to grab an object from a deep shelf, we still want to control both our legs and our arm simultaneously to properly lean towards the shelf. So we choose another option instead, which is to introduce a hierarchical learning paradigm. In practice, we identify a low-level skill in the form of a reaching policy. Being trained to reach any point in space with the robot hands, this low-level policy is also able to walk and reach points that are farther away. We then train a high-level policy that outputs targets for the reaching policy to succeed at more complex tasks. And that's what we do here at the bottom to autonomously move the box to a target on the table. The bottom line of this work is that hierarchies make the AI problem on humanoids more tractable. So where else can we introduce structure? In particular, we focus on transformer architecture. This neural network architecture is widely used in machine learning and language models and can capture global relations in observation sequences. And this is different than what happens in humans and animals, where the nervous system is routed following notions of locality, allowing us to have reflexes and fast reactions at the level of the spinal cord. So we asked ourselves, is locality an evolution artifact with no tangible contribution to learning? Or could it be a powerful inductive bias to guide robot learning? And specifically, how can we leverage locality when using transformers in a robotic setting? As a result of the study, we introduced a novel architecture called the body transformer that biases the vanilla transformer to take into account the structure of the robot body. In practice, we treat the robot body as a graph of sensors and actuators, and we use masked attention to make sure that at every layer of the encoder, a node can only attend to itself and its direct neighbors in the robot morphology. And finally, we decode the actions locally at the different nodes. Body transformer improves learning performance, reaching higher returns. It scales better when increasing model size and works well in a low data regime, which is key for the robotic setting. We deploy this learning architecture on a real-world robot with the control policy being trained entirely in simulation using reinforcement learning. Last but not least, the sparsity of our masked attention mechanism can potentially bring down computational cost of the architecture by a factor of 2 with respect to vanilla transformers, which can lead to massive speedups for high-dimensional systems. Now, switching gears a little bit, all of the work I've presented so far mostly focused on the think and act components. But I haven't talked about perception at all, and I've assumed perfect knowledge about the environment. In reality, the knowledge needs to be refined over time using available sensors, but the first fundamental question is robot sensing as good as human sensing? Let's take a step back and look at humans, where it is quite clear how our senses are all complementary to each other. In this video, a person has had their fingers anesthetized, and as a result, is having a very hard time performing a simple task, such as lighting a match using vision alone. What is missing is the dexterity the human touch provides us through our skin. If we instead look at robots, the sense of touch has almost been neglected until very recently. Common force torque sensors are bulky and stiff and only provide information about the forces acting at a single point, at the wrist of the robot. In comparison to human skin, this is very limiting. Our skin can sense contact over an entire surface, and this is what has served us as a motivation for us to develop novel tactile sensing hardware. We've addressed this by developing a very simple and intuitive tactile sensing principle. If we place a camera below a soft, transparent rubber material, and we randomly spread some tiny plastic particles within this rubber, once a force is applied, the material deforms and triggers particle motion, which is tracked by the camera. You can see this in action here. The white part of the sensor encloses the internal camera, while the soft membrane is this black part in here. By observing the changes in the patterns of green particles, which can be subtle to the human eye, we can reconstruct pressure and slippage forces applied to the outer membrane. The nice thing about the simplicity of this principle is that it makes fabrication straightforward and particularly scalable. With just one camera, we can collect tactile information over hundreds of thousands of pixels. We demonstrated the potential of our tactile sensor in a task that is quite challenging to do for humans too. If you have one at hand, you can try yourself to take a pencil, close your eyes, and try to swing up the pencil with your 2 fingers, just by moving the hand back and forth. I assure you this is a really challenging task. So we try to replicate this task with a robotic system and swing up a pendulum placed between 2 of our tactile sensors. Entirely based on the force feedback given by our sensors, the robots learn the swing up task, and it can even handle on the fly poles of different mass, length, and diameter. Why this is significant is that touch-based controllers hold promise to make our robots more reactive and precise, especially when dealing with small and fragile objects, even at great speeds. But for true generality, as I mentioned earlier, all sensors are complementary. So we took this a step further and asked ourselves, can we train a robot to perform tasks not only using vision or touch alone, but using a combination of senses, using vision, touch, and even sound? In this next work, we developed a large transformer model that can take in all these modalities in addition to language instructions and output actions that are applied to the robot. So what does this multimodality enable? Well, in grasping, it enables disambiguation. For example, our policy can respond to commands that would be ambiguous using visual appearance alone. For example, we can ask the policy, grab the object that looks yellow and feels squishy, or feels crinkly, and the robot will respond accordingly. Our model can also go inside a shopping bag where vision becomes less descriptive and express what an object feels like, for example, slick or fibrous in the case of a mop. As a result of this scalability is the unique possibility of doing compositional reasoning across modalities. For example, the model is able to achieve tasks such as push the training button that plays the same sound as the blue button. So what the robot does is it goes on pressing the blue button, reasoning about its visual cues, and listens to the audio. Then it thinks about the button seen during training and goes on to click the one that played the same instrument, in this case, the pink button. So by correlating information across different sensory modalities, we can now solve complex reasoning tasks, which would have been impossible to solve otherwise with this level of generality. In summary, I've talked about humanoids as the ideal robot embodiment to solve all human tasks and described ways to incorporate structure to simplify the learning problem. On the perception side, we have talked about how next-generation robot policies can rely on a diversity of sensory feedback, particularly including the sense of touch, for example, using the sensing technology that I've developed. Some future work directions, humanoids share a similar morphology to humans, so we can make robots learn from human videos. The video on the left shows some of our preliminary work in this direction. Finally, similarly to how babies do, we'd like to have robots to explore about the world in a way that maximizes meaningful interactions with the environment. And using the sense of touch just represents the perfect way to express that. The bottom line impact of my research is that in general, better sensing and more structure result in more interpretable and safer algorithms. On the application side, humanoids have the potential to revolutionize logistics, manufacturing, and healthcare industries, improving workplace efficiency and reducing human exposure to dangerous environments. Touch sensing will lead embodied AI systems to more intuitive and effective human-robot interactions with applications in elder care and rehabilitation, thinking especially about teleoperated surgeries or smart prostheses. Finally, as mentioned earlier, our work on benchmarking humanoid intelligence as a growing community that is pushing the boundaries of what robots can do and achieve day after day. But community goes beyond academic work, and I've been fortunate to communicate my research to the general public in several occasions, with talks and live demonstrations at amazing venues. I've had the interesting and unique chance to get feedback from a variety of people, such as artists, politicians, entrepreneurs, or even children. I've also been more than happy to write for online blogs to further disseminate our research and our vision. With this, let me thank all the people with whom I've shared the pleasure of doing this work. Thank you all for listening and again for inviting me today.
Thank you, Carmelo, for a fascinating talk. Lots of interesting stuff there. I know that we're going to run out of time soon, so I want to ask if there are any questions from the jury.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Can you tell me in 2 minutes why your approach enhances safety?
Yes, I'll give you a very simple example, right? Imagine like using vision alone to control robots. What would happen is that you would actually see the effect of an unsafe maneuver only after it has happened. So if you think about like a simple regression problem, right? It would be very hard to correlate what you're seeing with what is going to happen. Or it's going to be specific, case to case. What happens if you have touch information instead is that you can correlate safety or an unsafe behavior with the amount of force that you're applying on the scene. And that you can actually see before the effect of the unsafe maneuver. So that's kind of the biggest difference there.
Okay.
I have one. So I think you made a good argument for integrating sensors with other, with thinking and actuators and so on. But I think there is still a big gap to go from there to saying that we need a full humanoid. So, which in some sense, I think you made that argument at the beginning. So why do we need a full humanoid? Could we achieve many of these things with a different, maybe simpler, less ambitious goal?
Yeah.
Give us an argument for this very ambitious target that you have.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very relevant one. As you've really said, like it's, if you have to just have a cleaning robot in your house, like if to clean the floor, of course, like current Roombas or kind of similar alternatives are the perfect solution. They are great specialist robots. Now, the issue is if we want a robot that solves every other task, we need something that is compliant to our homes. It's hard to ask people to adapt their homes. It's much easier to tell people, I bring you something that's already adapting for your homes. And so that's why I think like, bimanual systems with dexterous hands is kind of the right format. Mm-hmm. Now we can talk about legs versus wheels, for example, which is another big topic there. As we know, like wheeled robots are more stable and much easier to control. But I would argue that this is like a temporary solution. And in the moment, we'll know how to use legs better than wheels or equally same as wheels. I think the discussion is not going to be there anymore, basically. Because we have steps in our homes where things that we want to avoid, and the legs just provide you with even an additional dexterity there. I want to think you to think about a simple task, which I think is very relevant for the legs and humanoid argument, which is like opening a fridge. It's a very hard task because it requires some kind of strong maneuver, but still it requires some compliance once the force is let off of the fridge. And having wheels there with a very high center of mass might be very dangerous, and the robot might end up losing the balance, while legs provide you with this additional compliance that lets you like balance off the heavy weight when you open the actual door of the fridge.
Thank you. Thank you. Good arguments. Any last questions? If not, I want to thank again all the 3 finalists for giving really fascinating talks. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Carmelo. And I think that Leila, Elisa, and I will have a tough job. But before we close, I would like to invite Maurizio Biasini, who's the scientific counselor at the Embassy of Italy, to make a brief remark. Maurizio, are you there? Let me see. I don't think I see Maurizio. Yes, he's there. He's
Okay, can you hear me now?
yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I had to be put as a panelist. So thank you, Professor Mencher. And for those who know me, yes, I am a science attaché at the Embassy of Italy. My background is in particle physics, and at the embassy, I work to promote structured collaboration in science and technology between Italy and US, with a particular emphasis on basic research in physics, astrophysics, and geoscience, as well as emerging technology like, of course, AI, quantum technology, and fusion energy. So first of all, I would like to congratulate really the finalists for their clear and informative presentations, as well as the members of the jury for the excellent work in selecting the candidates. As you know, the Embassy of Italy places great importance on our collaboration with ISSNAF, recognizing its instrumental role in promoting what we call the Sistema Paese here in the United States. Our goal is to strengthen even further the connection between the Italian diaspora and Italian public administrations, research institutions, universities, and private companies. In this regard, we are particularly pleased with the formal partnership established recently between ISSNAF and the Italian Ministry of University of Research, which has also provided financial resources to support the foundation's activities. And then we are, of course, especially pleased with the team chosen for this year's Embassy Award, Research in Artificial Intelligence. This topic will also be at the heart of the ISSNAF annual event, scheduled to take place on November 14 at the Embassy of Italy. AI has been a central focus for Italy's G7 presidency this year. And for example, Italy has recently committed to leverage AI for sustainable development, and the Ministry of Enterprises has launched, together with UNDP, the AI Hub for Sustainable Development, an innovative and inclusive platform which aims at strengthening local AI ecosystems in partnerships with African nations. For what concerns research, AI is the subject of a recent new agreement between the Italian Ministry of University and Research and the National Science Foundation, which the embassy has followed and promoted since the beginning. This collaboration has already led to a joint call, an ongoing call for AI research proposals, financially supported by both National Science Foundation and Italian Ministry. So therefore, I'm really very confident that the annual event will lead to a fascinating discussion, exploring various aspects of AI already as indicated today by the finalists. So to the 3 finalists in particular, I wish you the best of luck, not only for the final award, of course, but more importantly, for the bright careers that lie ahead of you. Thank you very much, and looking forward to meet all of you at the embassy in November.
Thank you so much, Maurizio. We really look forward to it. And we want to thank the embassy for sponsoring this prize. We're very grateful. And in closing, let me introduce Cinzia Zufada, the president of ISSNAF, to just close our meeting with a few final remarks. Cinzia?
Thank you, Phil. And thank you, the finalists, for excellent presentations. I have enjoyed these past hours. I've been chatting with you, kind of offline as this was going on. It's exciting. Thank you to the jury for your work in selecting the finalists. And I really look forward to getting to know more of your work and you personally when we meet on November 14th. It's a great pleasure that the embassy is supporting us again on this team, which we felt very strongly about for this year. And so we are extremely grateful to everybody who has participated so far. So until next month, I wish you all a good rest of the day. This symposium is coming to a close.
Thank you, everyone. See you in DC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.